nice to see you all on the first opening of the tour here in Bournemouth. Throughout the tour, different people of the Iconic team, I work for Iconic, are going to be sitting with David and going to be asking the questions that you've sent in to us during the Q&A. And we're going to start the evening with around an hour of dot connecting, because as you all know, that's pretty much the thing that he's best at. And then we'll ease into the Q&A, and we'll do that for about an hour and a half. If you do need to go out, can you please be mindful and be as quiet as possible? We've had events before where sometimes it gets a little noisy, and that could disturb. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. So I'll stop talking for now, and let's welcome David Icke.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey. Thank you. Thank you. Hey. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Hey. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be in Bournemouth. I'll tell you why. I remember Bournemouth a long time ago, very early 1990s. Couldn't walk down the street without being laughed at. I mean, it was just ridiculous. You know, comedian had to say my name and get a laugh. And I was invited to Bournemouth. I kind of vaguely remember it was a kind of a spiritualist church group. And it was packed, and I was treated with respect. And that was pretty much the first time that had happened since my top of the head blew off. And so I've always had a soft spot for Bournemouth since then, because, it's like I went around America in 1996, and I was talking to nobody. I mean, bugger all. I talked to 5 people in someone's front room in New England once. That's the kind of stuff it was. I would turn up and there'd be nobody there. I remember talking in Portland, Oregon, and the guy who put it on said, it's great to see so many people here tonight. I wasn't expecting this. There were 40 people, you know. And but where I'm going with this is, and then I turned up in Vancouver, and a guy had put on an event there for me, and 250 people were there. And it was just at that moment, you think, what's the point? And then bang, you think, well, maybe there is a point. And you go on a bit further. And there was another one when this sounds grand. I was on a tour of the north of England and Scotland. No, it wasn't a tour, no. And I remember I was expecting a decent crowd at Manchester, because I was getting quite a good feedback from Manchester. And me and my friend, who was traveling around with me, we thought, what we're going to do in the afternoon? And so we went to the Coronation Street tour, right? You know, and I remember seeing the first one of those in 1960, was it? Yeah, Ina Sharples and all that stuff. Of course, I'm old, like. And so we go in, and you go inside, and you go around all that stuff. And then we walk out. It's about 2 hours before the talk. You can't move for snow. And it's all happened while we've been inside. And it put the radio on in the car, struggling through the traffic, and it said, unless your journey is absolutely necessary, don't go out tonight. So I turned up at the event, and of course there was hardly anybody there. But then I went up to Scotland, and I spoke in a few places in Scotland to nobody. And there was one night, the lady at the theatre had said, it was in Forres, I think, in Scotland. She said, oh, we've had a lot of interest, right? I mean, she's about 3 calls, you know. And so I turn up, and it's a 325-seat theatre. And the front row was packed, right? Every other seat, nobody. And again, you reach that point of, what's the point? And then I went to Edinburgh, and there's about 200 or 300 people there. And you think, oh, keep going. And that's what it was like in those days. Or just when you thought, why am I doing this? Something would happen, and you'd you think, yeah, I'll go on a bit further, you know, a bit longer. And Bournemouth was one of those nights.
And then you had a peak at Wembley, didn't you?
Peak at Wembley.
It wasn't it? Wasn't it?
Yeah, I've not had
many people?
I've not had many peaks in my life.
Peaks, yeah. By the way, can you hear David fine? Is he not very loud? Okay, well.
Can you turn it up then?
Because I suddenly heard myself and I thought, wow, I sound a lot louder than the person
Yeah,
we're meant to hear.
you sound like you're in a warehouse that's empty. Like.
Well, we can always swap mics if needed.
It kind of did. Hello, where am I? What's happening? Yeah, it kind of did reach a bit of a peak in terms of audiences at Wembley. Yeah, we got about 6,000 people. And that was quite a long time ago, 2012 and 2014. But in those days, what you were doing was saying what was happening under the radar and kind of awakening people could see it. Most people couldn't see it. What we're looking at today is it's pretty much in our face. A lot of it is. And, you know, my journey, for want of a word, has been founded on always knowing that whatever you think you know, there's always more to know. I think that, you know, when you are in a reality in which we can see only a tiny band of frequency called visible light, ludicrously narrow, I think it's fair to say, without fear of contradiction, that whatever we know, there's always more to know. And what that does is kind of drive you on, because you think, okay, I think I've got this, but what don't I know? And I think what some people do, I think too many people do, is they reach a point and they think, I got it now. But you may have that bit, but what else is there to know? And so, you know, in this last 35 years, in the early 90s, I was looking at how the people who appeared to be running the world weren't actually running it. There was a network behind them I call the global cult. And then from about 1996, when I first traveled America, talking to nobody, but I was talking to nobody, but I was meeting amazing people, synchronistically, in the military-industrial intelligence complex network, who were telling me things that was going on in the background, and that's when the non-human level came in, because I was traveling America, talking to nobody again, but I met, in a period of 12 days, I met 15 different people who told me the same story. These were in different cities, that they'd seen someone who appeared to be human change into a non-human, often mostly reptilian form, and then back again. And then what's happened since, you know, my, quote, awakening in 1990 is that a subject will come into my life from nowhere, and suddenly information about that subject starts hitting me from all angles. This happened with the Global Cult Network in the early 90s. It happened after this experience in America in 1996. And it also happened when I started questioning, what is this place? What is this reality? And you realize, actually, in terms of physicality, it's illusory. And so all this information started coming to me, tangible information. And then the next stage was like, okay, so this is illusory in terms of the way we experience it. What's behind it? Why? And that took me eventually into, just after the turn of the millennium, the understanding that this is a construct, a simulated construct, which can be explained in detail. And what happened then, and I'm just covering the different subjects we might talk about tonight, is that the question then was, why? Why the construct? What's behind it? And then the next stage, which is what the reveal focuses on, is okay, when we leave this construct, what then? When our consciousness withdraws from the body, what then? What happens then? And that's the latest point I've got to in this, okay, I think I know this, but what don't I know? So goodness knows what's coming next.
Yeah, yeah, and of course you used to do marathon-like tours, because in the beginning you really wanted to explain everything into detail, and now you've moved more into the sort of connecting the unseen with events happening here, and so the format of tonight is slightly different from what you're used to.
Yeah, what I've been doing over the years, when I look back now, I think, what? I would talk for 10 hours, like in 4 sections, and I talk all day from about 9 in the morning until well into the evening. We were doing breakfast sometimes, because there was so much to say and so many dots to connect. But all that's kind of on video now, and people can watch it if they want to see it. But tonight it's much more an interaction that we're coming to go into wherever people want to go, because as I've just laid out, over the last 35 years, and this is absolutely what's necessary, you have to cover so many, you have to research so many subjects to reach a point where you can see something of the panorama of the game. And one of the things I've been doing in the last maybe a year and a half is challenging what I call the mainstream alternative media, which has kind of appeared since COVID, to actually expand its focus. Because what I've witnessed is a lot of people coming out of the mainstream into the alternative arena. Good, fantastic, right? As long as you bring something to the table. But it's kind of, from the alternative media that I remember, and it still exists outside of that inner core, it's regressed, and it's regressed into basically right-wing politics and the Christian religion. And people can have a right to have whatever the belief that they want. It's none of my business. The problem is not people having different beliefs. The problem comes when people want to impose those beliefs on everyone else. That's when all the conflict and the stuff comes up. But if you focus your attention, kind of what I've just said kind of is relevant to that. If you focus your attention on a particular belief, and that belief is not questionable, that's a gimme. I believe in this religion or that religion, that's a gimme. I believe in right-wing politics, that's a gimme. No question. Then there's vast areas of potential research and potential insight and potential understanding that you won't go into, because if you do, your belief system, whatever it is going to come under a challenge. So I think, if you really are seeking not the totality, crikey, in this reality we're only going to go so far, but if you're seeking the greatest extent you can possibly get of understanding what the hell's going on here, then your mind has to be free of preconceived, not perception, because we have different perceptions at different times and you move on, but unquestioning belief has to go. Because if it doesn't, you're not going to go into areas that we need to go into. And this is why, I guess, over the years, I've upset every bugger, really. I've upset everyone at some point. Well, not everyone, not people in this room probably, but I've upset loads and loads of people. Because what I'm doing, 2 things. I'm challenging not challenging, but I'm saying there's another way to look at this, not just the way you're looking at it. And of course, that's questioning someone's current belief, which is really something they will really react against. But the other thing is, this is really important, this. You're telling people what they don't want to hear. Yeah. That is always going to upset loads and loads of people. And what I've noticed with manipulation, perceptual manipulation, is how much telling people what they want to hear is the whole foundation of it. And I see people, they target a certain audience. It might be right-wing politics, it might be Christians, it might be, I don't know, Muslims, whatever, or left-wing politics. And they will then tell them what they want to hear. And when you tell people what they want to hear, the door's open, because they want it to be true. When you're telling people what they don't want to hear, like in the early 90s, hey, you know, the world's not like you thought it was, there's a conspiracy here, and this is where it's meant to go, they don't want to hear that. So they react against you. And the thing that's necessary, I guess more than anything else, if you're going to seek out as much as you can of what's going on, is you must have no preconceived belief that is not negotiable, if you like, in terms of the evidence that follows. And the other thing is, you must not get caught in the prison of fearing what other people think. Because if you get into that prison, and enormous number of people are in it, then you're no longer you. You are what you think others want you to be. You're no longer saying what you believe to be true, you're saying what you believe will be acceptable to others. And what that does, it creates, and this is, you know, you look at what we call human history, and it's kind of a constant recycling of the same themes. What happens is you create an eddy. You're going round and round and round and round and round. The river of awareness, the river of insight is all flowing past you, because you ain't going there, because that is going to upset these people you don't want to upset, because you fear what they'll think of you if you do. And so to be free of preconceived idea, so you'll go anywhere that the evidence takes you, and to be free of the fear of what other people think, is absolutely crucial if we're really going to get to the greatest extent of understanding what's going on. And you know, I have this phrase, life can give you your greatest gift brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. And the ridicule that I went through in particularly the early 1990s, but the 1990s in general, really, still up to a point today, but not the same of anything like it was, that freed me from the prison of what other people think. Because everyone was laughing. I mean, it was so extreme. You know, you go into a bar, well, you didn't really, but if you did, you know, there'd be uproar and laughter, and people would point at you in the street, and it was constant. And so you reach the point where you think, what does it matter? They're all laughing anyway, so I'm just going to be me. And I don't regret that for a second, because in the face of that ridicule, the instinctive reaction is to run and hide. And what I did is I went round at the height of it, absolute peak of it. I went round universities talking to students in students' unions. Mad. It was funny. There were loads of people there in those days, because all the ridicule, the Wogan show had just happened, and it was like, it was packed out. And it was packed out because they come to ridicule me. And then when they started to realize, oh, maybe he's not quite so mad, the numbers fell and fell and fell to virtually nothing, which is what I talked about in the United States. And it was a time of enormous challenge, but one of it just set me free. Because you thought, well, this is me. You may not like it, you may disagree with it, that's all fine, I have a problem with that. But this is me. It's not what you want me to be, it's what I am, and what I believe, and what I say is happening from what I've concluded. And if we could break out of these groupthink prisons where we censor ourselves to stay in the belief system of the group, and we started to really knock around what we feel and what we think, and we're open to going into areas that are outside the groupthink and the prison cell, this world would change dramatically, because the information's there. It just doesn't get in the public arena.
Yeah, the few popular moments you have are often when you've been proven right, and that's kind of short-lived because you're in a way already a few steps ahead again, seeing what's happening further afield, warning people about it, getting all the shit as well, because I see it daily on X, Twitter, you know, the stuff that people reply to you, not giving you at all the benefit of the doubt, even though over 35 years you've time and time again called it. But I guess in the pursuit of truth, there's just no compromise, is there, for you?
No, well, that's a consequence of what I've been talking about. It's a consequence of, okay, I think I've got this, but what don't I know? Because when you talk about this is coming, and you know, when I say, look, I predicted this, I said this was coming, I don't say that because, see, predicted this. I'm saying it for one reason. If I could do that, it must be a bloody plan. It's not organic. It's not something that is just happening. If you can say here, this is the plan here, and this happens, it's because it was a bloody plan. And then the next question is, if it's a plan, whose plan is it? And then you're in the rabbit hole, and down you go. But one of the consequences of that, always seeking more and more and more, is you talk about something and they say, no. And then it happens. And they go, oh yeah, well, he's right then. But then, by this time, you're here. What else don't I know? And then suddenly, the people here say, oh yeah, okay, yeah, he was right on that. They then start dismissing you again because you're here now. And then this happens, and then you're here now. And you know, it's not because I'm kind of special or anything. Anyone can do this. The point is, if you don't stop and say, okay, I've got it, you want more. It's always going to happen. You're always going to be looked at by large numbers of people of having gone too far. Yeah. You know, I had a chapter in a book, what was it? The Biggest Secret. It was called Don't Mention the Reptiles. Because this lady, she was lovely, but I knew her a long time ago. And she would say to me, David, I'm very worried. I think you've gone too far now. and so it would go on. And then she would say to me, oh no, David, I'm very worried. Don't mention the reptiles, right? And then about 2 years down the road, she's writing books about reptiles, you know. So it's like you really do have to clear yourself of the fear of what other people think, because if you don't, you won't say things that need to be said. And you know, I'm not coming from a point of view of, you know, I'm the guru sitting cross-legged under the tree. I'm just saying, here's another way to look at this, and here's some evidence to support that. Make of it what you will, because I think we are bloody drowning, historically as well as today, in people telling everyone else what they should think. Yeah. The thing is, people must decide their own reality and their own perception. And that's crucial to this awakening, because the whole foundation of the conspiracy to control humanity and to deliver this dystopia they're taking us into at the moment is to control human perception. You control human perception, you control human behavior. Behavior comes from perception. If you look at the COVID period, the COVID hoax, people were locked down, people had the fake vaccine, people social distanced for two reasons. One, their perception was that what they were being told is true, wasn't. And another group that was not sure they were being told the truth, but they feared not conforming because of the consequences of not conforming. And those two groups, as I've said many times, are responsible for every tyranny in history, and they're responsible for this one. And the third group, which will be represented in this room, that's the group that says, I can see you're lying to me and I'm not cooperating. I'm not cooperating with you. I'm not doing what you're telling me to do because I can see why you're telling me to do it. And that's the group that has ended every tyranny in history and will, if anyone ends this tyranny, it will be that group that ends it. Because if you, you know, if you look at any tyranny that was overturned, it's a small group that starts it, and then others follow. But it's like COVID. I remember very early on in COVID, there's a few people were protesting about it, and they were breaking lockdown rules and all that stuff to do it. And the police were picking them off dead easy, because there was so many police and so few protesters. And in the end, I mean, we walked, and Jamie and Gareth and all of us walked with, we went to every one. My daughter Kerry is no longer with us, unfortunately. I came too, always went with Kerry. In the end, there were hundreds of thousands of people walking through the streets of London.
That was amazing energy.
And now the police are standing on the side of the road watching us walk by, because we'd reached, and this is one of the sad things, I think, if I would talk about this. Those protests against COVID, because people were united by a common cause, things like religious belief and political belief were put aside. And if anyone was at those marches, they were not protests, they were spiritual happenings.
Yeah, it really felt like that.
It was just incredible, the unity of people, putting aside where we would disagree, but there was common cause, and there was a common energy. There was an enormous unity. It was a spiritual event. What I've seen since then, and this is one of the reasons I'm so vehement about what I call the hijack of the alternative media at its central core, where it gets all the promotion and all the algorithmic support, is that has regressed back into factionalism among so many people. And we need to get that back.
Definitely.
We need to get that back, because
definitely.
Because I don't care if you support Trump. I don't care if you support Harris. I might wonder on both, but I might wonder in both cases. But I don't care. People have a right to do that. But the point is that those things need to be put aside, and we need to see that there's a common challenge here, and that is actually the force that is string pulling both of them.
Yeah.
And you know, this is one of the things that the regression has lost, which we had at one point really strongly, and that is we live in one-party states. So as they said, it used to say in America when I was traveling around there in the 1990s, it doesn't matter who you vote for, the government still gets in. And because there's a left of the global cult and there's a right of the global cult, but the global cult is controlling both sides. And so you get to the same place, but in a different way, in a different route, with different rhetoric. And so when you look at the situation in this country now, and you look at it from these parties are controlled, or well, the parties are, yes, but key people in the party, that's the real point. And the shadow people that control the party, they're actually answerable to the same force. So it's kind of interesting that you had Rishi Sunak shock even relatively close to him people by calling an election on July the 4th this year, which, as he was told by his people and MPs, he couldn't possibly win. And it's easy from a black and white perspective to say Sunak's an idiot and he just made a big error. But that's what they want you to think. That's what the cult wants you to think, because then you don't see the subtleties and the nuances and all the rest of it. But he called that, I would say, shock general election. He couldn't win because he wasn't meant to win. The person who was coming in was waiting in the wings, and that was Starmer, Keir Starmer, Keir Starmer. And immediately after that, because as I said before he came in, this Labour government is going to be the most despised and the most opposed one of them in British political history. Because I knew what he was coming in to do. Because you have a two-party system. Basically, you have any chance of forming a government. And like in the Conservative Party, you have a constituency within that doesn't want this stuff. They call it Middle England, whatever they want to call it. It doesn't want this stuff. It doesn't want all the climate change transformation of the landscape. It doesn't want all this stuff. But the left, they will go with this stuff, right? So with the Conservative Party, like the Republican Party in America, they have to be more circumspect. They have to use kind of different rhetoric. And it can take a bit longer to get to the outcome, the cult outcome. But in terms of like the Democrats in America, you don't have that pushback. You don't have that constituency that doesn't want this stuff because it's been mesmerized to actually want it and think it's a good thing. And it's the same with the Labour Party, although people are now seeing just how far he's planning to go. The cult is planning to go through him. They do want a lot of this stuff. And so the left can move quicker. That's where I'm going with this. And so he's been brought in to dramatically drive this agenda. And what is the agenda? First of all, it's mass censorship, and it's intimidating people to censor themselves. Self-censorship is the most insidious form of censorship because there's no debate, you just don't say anything. So immediately after he comes to power, Sunak, Starmer, you had this horror in Southport. And I don't know the background to this kid that was involved in this, but I will say this, having researched mind control to a very, very extreme degree between about 1996 and 2003, and talked to people who've been in the MK Ultra mind control horror in the United States, and talk to people who are aware of these mind control techniques, that if you get hold of someone, you take control of their minds, you make them do anything. So anyway, I just put that out as a comment, as an aside, because that is absolutely possible. These kids that go crazy with guns in America and lead to new laws and what have you, invariably they are connected to mind control and the drugs of mind control. So anyway, this Southport horror happens. And then there's a reaction, and an understandable reaction in terms of the extraordinarily emotionally charged nature of what happened. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And you know, you can also pump prime things. You can put people in there that pump prime, and then others just follow. And so you had the reaction. And immediately, obviously all waiting to go, you had all these people jailed for years sometimes for comments on social media and memes even. And there's no doubt, you know, I've been looking at social media since then. It has intimidated a lot of people to watch what they say. And it's just the start, because this online safety bill of the Tony Blair created Ofcom, Office of Communications, the government censor in other words, that its power is going to be increased by this mob currently in power in government. And what else is on the wish list of the cult? The end of fossil fuels as we know them, and the replacement with wind power and solar power and all this stuff. So what they're planning is a massive increase, enormous increase. It's going to devastate the landscape and seascape of wind turbines and what they call solar farms. And, you know, when you look at the whole climate change hoax, because it is, I mean, CO2 is the gas of life, you know, there'd be no food supply without that. You can see a very simple technique that's being used. All you have to do, because the idea is to transform human society into a totally different entity, where you're pushing people into small communities, what they're calling 15-minute cities, that eventually you won't be able to leave without permission. That's the idea. And carbon taxation and all this stuff that's going on and being proposed, and a dystopia beyond anything that we've ever seen or experienced in known human history in the scale of the technological control. And all you have to do to achieve that is to set net zero at a certain year. Because the whole of the Industrial Revolution has been founded upon fossil fuel use. Without it, there'd be no Industrial Revolution. Where would the steam technology come from, etc., to kick it all off? And so if you set net zero at this particular year, then in achieving that or getting towards that, you have to reduce and reduce and reduce the use of fossil fuels. And in doing so, you must transform society into a completely different entity, because the society that we know is based on the use of fossil fuels. So if you reduce them and reduce them and reduce them, the society that we know has to transform dramatically. And so you could see that when Starmer came in, that was going to happen. And of course, we've got this guy, Ed Miliband. Blimey, very good to his mother. He never goes home, you know. Ed Miliband, and that's another point, you know, that I've picked up over the years, is this current Labour government, and I've got no brief for the Tories, oh my God, start me on Johnson, but this Labour government is a blueprint, archetypal cult government, because you have a guy, Starmer, who seems to be very emotionally deficient, who is going to go for this and take no for an answer. That's where he's going with it. Whether he'll achieve that is another thing, but that's where he's going. Oh, there's got to be tough decisions to be made financially. No, what you mean is you want to squeeze the population and take away their ability to have an independent life. That's what you want. He's talking about the state's going to take control back of people's lives. Yeah, exactly what you want to do. But what he's created is a cabinet of people who, you know, not to put too fine a point on it, as they say, is a bunch of bloody morons, right? Now, this you'll notice is what happened around the world during COVID. You had the lady in New Zealand, Ardern. You had Daniel Andrews in Victoria, Australia. You had Trudeau in Canada. Blimey, you've got Biden in America. And all these people are very limited intellect. And that's what they want, because people who are not very bright are easy to manipulate, and they'll do what you tell them. You know, just persuade them that they thought of it, and you got them, basically. So if you look at this cabinet, we at a time of, well, I mean, you know, it's happening today in terms of Israel and Lebanon and Iran, of great tension, not least with Ukraine and Russia. We have a foreign secretary called David Lammy, right? He's not the brightest man in an empty room, right? And he's infamous for it. I've been watching him for years and years and years. He's infamous for it. But he's foreign secretary. And these things are not by accident, you know. I mean, you've got Miliband in charge of net zero. I mean, these are not by accident. And, you know, when you look at these things, and there's different levels at which it's working. On one level, you've got incompetence, stupidity. But in terms of public perception, it does something to the spirit of the nation when they see the scale of stupidity that's running the country. So when they brought Biden in, who was clearly, when he was running for president, moving closer and closer into senility, and they put him in that White House, that said two things. It said, one, we can put anyone in we like. And secondly, what did it do to the American psyche, which is kind of proud of America, you know, greatest country in the world and all that, to have that guy as president of the United States for the last 4 years? So it's all about perception manipulation. It's also about breaking the spirit, breaking the spirit of a country by who you put into power. And also, number three, if they can put complete morons in government, and they want the public to see that, this is the point, this is the perceptual control. They want you to see they're not very bright. Because it says something if a group of people, which the population can see ain't very bright, but the population still obey them and still obey what they do, what they say, what they demand, what they impose. That's another spirit breaker, because if you'll you look in COVID at Johnson, you look at Christopher Whitty, and all these people, and they're saying, oh yeah, oh God, Hancock, blimey, oh yes, we do this, we've got to do this, social distance, and people do it. That does something. That does something, and it says something. It says that you'll be compliant to anybody. And, you know, one of the things that I've really kind of understood over the years is this force that is, and we'll get into that as we go along, but this force that is ultimately behind this manipulation of human society, they're idiots too, because you wouldn't want to do what they're doing if you weren't. But where they're brilliant is manipulating human perception, breaking the human spirit, and predicting that if you provide stimulus A, you're going to get reaction B from the public. They're brilliant at that. And that's how the whole conspiracy works, because quite simply, 8 billion people cannot be controlled by a relative handful, and it is, by comparison. If the 8 billion won't have it, it's impossible. So they have to control your perception to control your behavior so that you won't do the necessary thing, which is total mass non-cooperation, and then we'll see where the real power is, and it's not with these people.
Okay, so David, we have about 15 minutes left. There's a few subjects that you wanted to talk about. One of them is Israel, one of them is Boris Johnson. We've talked about Keir Starmer. I mean, we could talk about him for a long time in a sort of slightly ridiculing way. But what would you like to get into before we go to the Q&A?
In terms of Johnson, the reason I mentioned him, he's got a book out, right? Just out. In which, first of all, this man was Prime Minister of Britain. He's saying in this book that he considered invading the Netherlands from the sea to get hold of COVID vaccines. He says that in his book.
Yes, and they told him you probably won't be able to do this undetected. And he was like, oh, okay, well in that case I won't then.
You won't be able to do it undetected? Oh really, why not? Right, I mean, what? I mean, dear. Yeah. Anyway, the other thing that he's saying in this book, which has got a lot of coverage today, is that he believes that the COVID virus came out of the Wuhan lab by accident. There was an error or a mistake in the lab, and it escaped. People here will know that since the spring of 2020, I've been saying there is no COVID virus. And the reason I say that is first of all, talking to people who've really studied this stuff in detail. But also, when you look at how the hoax was played, the question is, where's the bloody virus? Because you had this concept of this virus that had come out of China. And we're back to perception. We're back to control of perception. Everything is that, everything. So we had pictures of people collapsing in the street in China. Well, they haven't collapsed in the street anywhere else, but they collapsed in the street in China, and it's, ooh, dear, oh my God, right? But it's still China. It's still a long way away. So what you need is something that will get people in the West and the wider world to think, hold on, it could happen here. So we had Italy. And we had all those pictures of all the stuff going on in Italy and Italian hospitals in the north of Italy, which is actually infamous for respiratory disease in that area. Lombardy and that kind of area. And after that was all done and people were going, hey, it could happen to me, it could happen here, the health ministry in Italy announced, after the propaganda had done its job, that probably only about 12% of people designated as dying of COVID actually did. I would go further and say it was actually 0% for reasons I'll come to. And so the perception was being wound up all the time that this was a dangerous virus and you need to protect yourself from it by doing what the government said. So if you've not got a virus, how can you give the impression of one? Well, first of all, the cases. The cases were claimed to be from the PCR test, which was created by a biochemist in America called Kary Mullis. He won the Nobel Prize for it. And when the HIV virus was floating around and being blamed for AIDS and what have you, he was pointing out that the PCR test couldn't be used to test for the HIV virus because that's not what it did, that's not what it was created for. But he did accept, I've read his biography, he did accept, because everyone was saying it, this is the point, everyone's saying it must be true, that the HIV virus existed. And then he was doing a paper, it was about the PCR test, and he was writing a bit about the HIV virus in that. And he wanted a note, a link to a paper that showed that HIV existed. So he was working in a university at the time, and he went to the virologist guy at the university, and he said, can you give me a reference to a paper that shows that HIV causes AIDS? Classic response he got. The virologist said, oh, you don't need that, mate. Everyone knows that, right? Everyone knows that. That's the great line that covers so many lies and so many misdirections. So he said, no, mate. I want a reference to the paper for my paper. So he goes on and he goes on, he goes on, he tries everywhere. And they told him, go to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in America, CDC site, they've got a reference. So he goes there, and the reference they gave for this is HIV causes AIDS was actually not saying that at all. So eventually, he's trying to find confirmation, a paper, a reference, can't. Eventually, he's talking at a conference, and the French guy, who was the joint recipient of the Nobel Prize for discovering the HIV virus with an American bloke, connected to Fauci, by the way, he was talking there as well. So he said, oh, mate, he said, just the man I want. Can you give me a reference for my paper to HIV causes AIDS? And he referred him to the CDC website, which he'd already been to, and it didn't do that. In other words, the guy who got the Nobel Prize for discovering HIV couldn't give him a reference to show that it existed. And it existed because of repetition. So what Kary Mullis was saying, and he died not long before the COVID card was played, and had he been alive, he'd have been shouting through a megaphone, you can't use my test to test for this virus. This is his own words. The PCR test cannot tell if you're sick. It tests for genetic material. It's different motivation. And then right on cue, in January of 2020, a virologist called Christian Drosten, who I wouldn't trust to sell me a new car, never mind an old one, in Germany, came out with the protocol to use the PCR test to test for the COVID virus. And it wasn't peer-reviewed or any of that stuff, but the World Health Organization, created by the Rockefellers, cult family to their DNA, run by Bill Gates, fronted up by this guy Tedros, they supported the test immediately, and it was kind of used around the world. So the test was not testing for the virus. And there was one other thing, is that the PCR test works on amplification, numbers of amplification of the test. The higher the amplification, the more it is going to test positive for anything eventually, if you get it high enough. And from the recommended levels of amplification, you compare them to the levels used by the National Health Service and other such bodies around the world, they were massively higher. So they were getting positives all over the place for a virus that the PCR test was not testing for in the way that it was said. And every single one was a case. Now, but it wasn't. Now, this is where a symptomatic transmission comes from. They pulled that out of the air. Why? They wanted everyone locked down. They wanted everyone social distancing. They wanted everyone to obey the diktats that they were doing, not just those who were showing symptoms of illness. So they come up with a symptomatic transmission. You can give it to someone even though you seem to be perfectly well. And therefore, if we can get as many people as possible to keep testing as they did, we're going to get enormous numbers of people who are perfectly well, have got nothing wrong with them, to test positive. And everyone's going to be a case, boom, 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 the numbers go up. Oh my God, the number of cases has gone through the roof, says the mainstream media. And we're going to be able to justify lockdown. But you need deaths. So they came up with this idea that if you tested positive for a virus that wasn't testing for the virus, the PCR test, and these others were just the same, then you died of any other cause in the next 28 days, then COVID-19 went on your death certificate. It was either by COVID or with COVID, but the numbers were the same. All the death numbers are going up. So people who fell down the stairs, people who were in road accidents, there was a coroner in a county in America who pointed out publicly that a fifth of her COVID deaths were from gunshot wounds. That people have been shot. But because they'd tested positive, because they've tested everyone all the time, in the previous 28 days, sometimes it was longer, then COVID-19 went on the death certificates. There was your deaths. Then you need financial incentives for the hospitals. So the American government were paying hospitals $4,600 for diagnosing regular pneumonia, not COVID pneumonia, regular pneumonia. They were paying them $13,000 for every patient they designated COVID pneumonia, and $39,000 for everyone they put on a ventilator that was almost certainly kill them. And then you had, was come out, and I've had direct evidence shown to me of this about 2 years ago, by a guy whose father went through this, died this way. They were giving people in care homes the end-of-life drug midazolam in league with morphine that was taking them out. And what they called it was the first wave of COVID. And interestingly, I mean, the figures are there to be seen, official figures. Under Hancock's, when he was health secretary, the government bought record numbers of midazolam doses and used them in record numbers in that period when they were really trying to sell COVID as a real threat to everybody so they'd conform. And that was when thousands of old people died, and when they called it the first wave of COVID. In America, Fauci had been involved in studies about a drug called remdesivir. And remdesivir had been in a trial for use for the Ebola virus, quote, and killed people and damaged them so much they stopped the trial. What remdesivir does is cause multiple organ failure, especially the kidneys. And when the kidneys stop working, the abdominal cavity fills up with fluid. The lungs obviously are massively affected. And they die of, quote, respiratory disease. Fauci told hospitals they had to use remdesivir on people who had been designated by the PCR test as COVID patients. And enormous numbers died as a result. There's a guy in this country, an undertaker you'll probably all know, called John O'Looney. And he started speaking out about the effects of this fake vaccine that he was finding in people who've died. And suddenly he got ill, and he went to hospital. He had a respiratory problem, and they wanted to give him remdesivir. And because he had the knowledge of remdesivir and what they were doing, not least in America, he refused it. And John O'Looney is still with us. He wouldn't have been if he'd have taken remdesivir, which the doctor insisted that he should have. So then you look at the other thing that they were doing. Oh, what are you doing?
Well, it's basically an alarm saying,
oh, okay.
Hour is up. So if we don't do that, it's never going to end.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to questions now when I finish this. But what you then, and again, this is in the public record. When they said that COVID-19 is a deadly virus and it has flu-like symptoms, guess what disappeared worldwide? Flu. Disappeared worldwide. Why? Because they were redesignating it COVID-19. Anything to do with respiratory disease and pneumonia, COVID-19. This is what they were doing. And so at the end of all that, and I could go on, but I won't, the question is, where's the bloody virus? Because if you had what the alternative media claims is a bioweapon, the virus, and increasingly people like Johnson, oh no, it came out of the lab, but it was a mistake. If you had a virus, not least a bioweapon, you wouldn't need to do any of the things I've just described, because it would just do its job. It would kill people. But I tell you this, what I've learned over the years about this cult and its mentality, it is terrified of losing control of an outcome. So if it was dealing with a football match, it wouldn't be happy with controlling one side. It would want to control both sides and the referee, so before the kickoff, it would know what the score was going to be. That's the mentality, because despite its arrogance, it's incredibly insecure, because it knows that if humanity starts to wake up, it's over. It's frickin' over. It knows that. And it's terrified that's going to happen. But it wants to control outcomes. It's terrified of states of flux. And for them to release a bioweapon and not know where it was going or what the effect was going to be, no frickin' chance. It would not be able to cope with it. So the ideal is to give people the impression it exists, because then you can do what you bloody like.
You can do it over and over again.
You can do it over and over again, and you can invent variants. You can do what you bloody like because you've got control of it. Because you've got control of the propaganda and the narrative, therefore you've got control of it. And one of the, another thing that I challenge the alternative media about is that they are saying that it came out of the lab and it was done on purpose because this cult couldn't care less why you believe the virus exists, as long as you believe it does. Because then they can play it, you're right, again and again and again and again. And they're planning to. They're talking now about, this new strain of, more virulent strain of COVID is traveling through Europe and all that stuff. Bird flu virus and all this stuff coming on. They can play it again. But the big thing they don't want you to know is it was a scam on that level, because then they can't play it again. And that's why I'm kind of at odds with a lot of the alternative media, and they're at odds with me, because I'm interested in the truth, not a preconceived idea. And this is the thing, the last thing I'll say before we start the questions is, what they do, they know that vast numbers of people will buy their narrative. They know that. But they know increasingly that more and more people won't. They'll be looking for a conspiracy behind the narrative because of what they've seen up to this point. So what you do is you give them a conspiracy. You just give them the wrong one. And then they'll go down and chase that rabbit down the hole when it's the wrong rabbit. That's my view anyway.
So you're always directed deeper into the wrong rabbit holes and...
Yeah.
Yeah. Well...
We're off.
We're off. These are your questions.
Blimey. There's loads. Go on then.
Okay. So this one is from Crystal. And the question is, do you think there will be a time when everybody wakes up and the establishment will be overturned? Honest answer.
Right.
You're always honest, but...
Well, yeah, well, the question is, what is the establishment? Because there's different levels of it. This is where this journey has taken me over the last 35 years. You've got the cult establishment. They're the ones that run the world of the scene, if you like, that operate behind governments and corporations and all this stuff. But then, in the continuing question, okay, so what don't I know? You then start to realize, as I did towards about the mid-1990s, that there's a non-human element to this. And this non-human element operates, people talk about extraterrestrials and spaceships and stuff. This extraterrestrial, in other words, non-terrestrial element operates outside of human sight. And then you go to the next level, which I'll come to, of the so-called establishment. One of the things I would say that should be taught to every child from the first moment they can grasp it, is when you look through your eyes, you're not seeing everything in the space you're looking at. You're only seeing a narrow band of frequency called visible light, which is so narrow it's ridiculous. And I say it's narrow on purpose. So if you had a wider acuity of visual frequency, you could see a wider frequency, you would see that which is controlling the cult in the human world. So you'd know the game. Of course, we're not supposed to know the game, so what we are limited to, I say on purpose, is this narrow band of frequency. It doesn't include that. So you know, when people talk about, I saw a spaceship and it came out of nowhere and disappeared into nowhere, and I saw this entity appeared at the end of the bed, it disappeared into nowhere. From a 5 sense perspective, that's ridiculous, impossible. And this is why children must need to be taught this very early on. But what's happening is when something enters visible light, it appears to the observer to come out of nowhere. And when it leaves visible light, it appears to the observer to disappear into nowhere. And that's what's happening. They've not disappeared, they've left the frequency band that we can perceive in terms of sight. So this non-human manipulative force, shall we say, which the cult in the human world serves, this global network of secret societies, is outside of the human visible frequency band, but is very close to it. And it's in a frequency that is known in the esoteric world as the astral. And there's the lower astral, which are the lower frequencies, and there's the higher astral, which are the higher frequencies. And this force operates in the lower astral frequencies. And the question then came when I understood this, not least from people who've seen that and whistleblowers in the military industrial intelligence complex, etc. The question is why? Because I then went on to realize that this is a simulation akin to a vastly advanced virtual reality game to entrap human perception in an illusion. Once you've got them entrapped, then you can manipulate events that generate what you need to be generated. And that is low vibrational human emotion and low vibrational human thought. Mainstream science, every time we think, we are generating frequencies, and those frequencies relate to the nature of the thought. Same with emotion. So things like fear, and if you look at the currency of human control, it's fear. Fear, anxiety, depression, hatred, conflict in all its forms, they're low vibrational frequencies. And I've learned over the years from many and various sources that this non-human force operating just outside the visual frequency range is feeding off low vibrational human energy. Because it's in itself a low frequency phenomenon, these entities, which go under various names in various cultures, but they all talk about them. Religions too. Religions call them demons and what have you, and you know, the Gnostics called them archons. Different names, but they're talking about the same phenomenon. They have created this simulated reality to manipulate humans into low vibrational states of mental and emotional frequency, so they feed off them. And therefore, they have no interest whatsoever in a world of love, of joy, of happiness, any of those things. That doesn't feed them. They want to constantly generate events that cause fear, anxiety, all these things. And then you've got this, because in the end, these entities, whatever form they may take, reptilian, not only reptilian, other non-human forms, their behavior, like human behavior, comes from a state of consciousness. And so in the end, this simulation, this simulated human world, is the creation of that consciousness which works through these entities in non-human form. So Christianity calls that consciousness Satan or the devil, and the entities it calls demons. Islam calls the consciousness Shaitan or Iblis, and it calls the entities jinn. The Gnostics call the consciousness Yalda Baoth, or the demiurge, and the entities archons, which is Greek for rulers. And you find this phenomenon all over the world. When I'm researching, I'm always looking for not patterns of disagreement, you find them everywhere, patterns of agreement. And it's amazing how many there are, where different belief systems actually fuse into this same theme. And this theme is very clear in what I'm talking about. There is a force operating in the hidden for human sight, that is manipulating human society. And it's doing it through this cult, through this network. And I started to understand too, because as I researched through the 1990s, and I was looking at all these people in this global cult and what was behind it and all the rest of it, and I found they were doing satanic bloody rituals, right? They were doing satanic rituals, and they were rituals very, very similar, if not the same, as they were doing in ancient Babylon and other places. And you think, well, why are these people, billionaires and all these people, why are they doing this? And then you think, well, why were they doing it in the ancient world? They were doing rich sacrificial rituals to the gods as a gift to the gods. And you then go, well, hold on a minute. And you see that the gods, these entities, that they were doing the rituals the sacrificial rituals to in the ancient world openly then, is now being done in secret by the cultists, and they're the same gods. And it's amazing when you look around the world, we talk about the Greek pantheon of gods. But all over the world you see pantheons of gods under different names. But actually, they're the same gods, they're the same entities. So the next question is, okay, so what do the gods get out of these sacrificial rituals? And it's the same thing. They use the rituals to create such terror in the victim that they're generating this really powerful energy of terror, low vibrational, and these entities are feeding off it. That's the gift to the gods of human sacrifice. And they're still doing it today in secret. When you reach those levels of terror, an adrenaline enters the blood. And that's what the Satanists drink. It's like a drug to them. Gives them a high. This is adrenochrome and all this stuff that you hear about in places like Washington, D.C. So there was another guy you might have heard of called Robert Monroe. He kind of popularized out-of-body experiences. This is different to near-death experiences where the body dies and the consciousness is released. And, I've read endless accounts of that and watched endless accounts. Amazing common themes again. But out-of-body experiences is when you consciously project your consciousness into this astral dimension. And he became so good at it that the CIA got interested and started a project called Gateway, in which they got people together who had this ability, and they did this study on what they were finding in the astral. And interestingly, one of the things they found was very, very common in the astral was reptilian entities. And they gave them a name in this Gateway project. They called them the alligators. But what Monroe said he learned in these astral travels, as they call them, is that there were entities in the astral that were feeding off low vibrational human emotion. And I'd established this to my own satisfaction from other sources before I came across this. This was a big confirmation. The establishment is that which controls human society directly, the cult as I call it, it's that which this serves, which is these entities, and ultimately it's this consciousness that goes under various names. And this consciousness is ultimately what is feeding off low vibrational human emotion. And so you can look at a situation and you can look for a solution to it. And if you've, because I'm not interested in solutions for a simple reason. Solutions usually lead to more problems, which require more solutions. My interest is looking at the cause of the problem, because if you remove the cause, the problem must disappear because its cause is gone. And if you look at, in terms of our part in this, being manipulated into these low vibrational states of emotion and mental states, and this constant conflict with each other, and the group conflict between, you know, religions and political things and what have you, that's what is generating the control, the energy for the control system. That's what's generating it. And this is why they, again, want to control human perception, because they want perception in these low vibrational states. They want us fighting each other. So, for instance, they open the borders, southern border of the United States, the borders of Europe, now the borders of the United Kingdom, to vast numbers of people from other cultures who are overwhelmingly young adult men. They put them up in hotels, they look after them while the indigenous population of various colors, creeds, whatever, is struggling. And they want you to see that. They're not trying to hide it from you. They want you to see that's what's happening. Because they want to generate fury, resentment, anger among the indigenous population because they want this, and they want to, you know, blame it on other groups, so that they'll have this tension, this eventually civil war. That's what they want, because they're not trying to hide it. They want you to see it, and you know, if we would just put aside our beliefs, our unquestioning beliefs, whether it's a Muslim belief or Christian belief or any belief, just put it aside and just talk to each other, we'd realize how much we have in common, and how we never realized we did. You know, it's like you get a small number of people in Russia tell their troops to invade Ukraine. Small number of people in Ukraine tell their troops to fight the Russians. This is like every single war that's ever happened. A tiny group of people tell the population to fight another population ruled by another small group of people, and the small groups of people never see a gun fired in bloody anger. And if both, it's like we said in the 60s, what if we had a war and no one turned up? You know, we can be told to fight someone else, but we don't have to bloody do it. We can choose not to. And then there would be no war. We could have belief systems without seeking to impose them on others. And it's all a choice that we're making. So the answer, in answer to the question of, you know, are we going to wake up to the point where we bring down this establishment? Well, the first level of waking up to that is to realize we're the ones holding this thing up. We're the ones doing it. And we can choose not to do it. We can choose not to do it en masse, and then, oh my God, we had the power all along, yes! I remember Larry Grayson. You remember Larry Grayson, the comedian? I knew him at one point, lovely guy, real genuine bloke. And when he died, I was invited to his memorial service in Covent Garden. And he was celebrated by, you know, the people who knew him. And one of them was Roy Hudd, another comedian. And he did like a eulogy to Larry Grayson. And in that, he told this story. It was hilarious. It was kind of like a funeral kind of setting, but everyone was bloody laughing because, you know, you did laugh a lot around Larry Grayson. And what Roy Hudd said, he said, Larry told me this story, that he was in the last, you know, remaining vestiges of the kind of old musical kind of variety theatres. He was in this this show, and the end of the show was the rest of the cast came onto the stage dressed as sailors, and they were singing Rule Britannia. And they all then got on each other's shoulders, and they formed this pyramid on the stage. Asking for disaster, but they were a pyramid on the stage. And they're singing Rule Britannia. And then Larry came on, dressed as Britannia, right? With the robe and the helmet and the sword. And they manhandled him up the top of the thing for the big finish, right? And the way Roy Hudd told this story, he said, well, Larry said that one night things seemed to be going rather well. He said, then I noticed that the sailor in the bottom left-hand corner had got quite a cough. And what happened is this guy, bottom of the pyramid, had got a cough and he couldn't stop coughing. And eventually he stepped out of the pyramid. And Larry Grayson said he ended up in the second row, right? Now, Larry Grayson is symbolic of this frickin' cult. This tiny group of people that are controlling and dictating to the entirety of global human society. And he ended up in the second row because one sailor in the bottom of the pyramid had got a cough. And that is incredibly symbolic. I saw it immediately. I thought, my God, that's so symbolic, that story. Because we have control, we have the ability to end this tomorrow. What is the establishment? They're tiny. It's the population they are imposing upon, obeying the few, cooperating with the few that allow this to happen. And, you know, it's something to think about in terms of how few people actually control 8 billion. It is ludicrous. That's why they have to have us fighting each other. They have to do it. They have to divide and rule and set the population at war with itself. Because if we're not fighting each other and we kind of stop, hey, oh, stop, wait, so quiet a minute. Who's that bloke holding the strings attached to me? And you, and the people I'm fighting. Who is that? We have to keep fighting each other. That's why it's all set up like this. That's why it's been done like this. Throughout human history, fight, war. Not just to generate low vibrational energy, which it is. It's also to divide and rule the population so we don't have the unity, which is why I talked earlier about this wonderful unity that we had in those marches against COVID restrictions in London. They don't want that. They're terrified of it. And if we only did it, then it would all be over. But the question is, are we going to do that? And you know, one of the great ways that we are held in servitude is religion. In my view, it is the greatest form of mind control ever invented. And what I mean by religion is a religious belief that it cannot be questioned. It's a gimme. That it creates a prison of the mind, which says, I can't go there because it's outside of my belief. And you've got all these different religions all going down that same road. And it's interesting, isn't it, you know? People say, oh, no, I came to my own conclusions. Oh, dear, really? 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 So if you were born in India, what are you likely to be? An Hindu. If you're born in the southern states of America, what are you likely to be? A Christian. If you're born in the Middle East or Pakistan, what are you likely to be? A Muslim. And these extreme Christians and extreme Muslims and extreme Hindus, if they had been born in a different part of the world, they'd be an extreme Christian and of another religion or something. Because it's not organic, it's not something clearly that you have decided for yourself. It's in terms of the mass of the people. It's something that you have been brought up to believe, and it's what the only thing you've ever known. And that's the way it works. And then once you've got people with unquestioning beliefs, you play them off against people with other unquestioning beliefs, and we have the divide and rule, and we have the generation of this low vibrational energy, which is feeding the beast. And so, are we going to bring down this establishment? The question is, are we going to realize what's causing it and stop doing it? Because if we don't, we won't. If we do, we will.
And I guess one of your main frustrations in the mainstream alternative media, as you call it, is that what they still seem to be doing is very much choosing sides, which is completely against what you've just said now, that it's about understanding where the crossovers are and where we meet.
Yeah, this is the thing, taking sides. If you take a side, you'll see this all around the world. My God, you'll see it in the Middle East now, and Ukraine, Russia, and all the rest of it. If you take a side to this extent, you are massively part of the problem. This extent that you will not criticize anything your side is doing, because it can't be wrong. You see this with Israel all the time. And nothing the other side is doing can possibly be right or have any validity, because they can't be right, because they're the opposition. And that level of taking sides is what creates this divide and rule and this constant conflict, which is the cause of human control. So if you take a step back, and what you look at is not sides, you look at behavior. Whatever the bloody side, doesn't matter. So in that way, you can condemn what happened on October the 7th, and you can condemn what happened in response to that in Gaza, horrific. You can condemn what Mossad and the IDF did recently in Lebanon, with all those pages exploding with horrific consequences. You can condemn the psychopaths of Hezbollah, and you can condemn the psychopaths of Mossad and the IDF and the Israeli inner circle government, which actually ultimately isn't Jewish, funnily enough. Because you're not taking a side. You're looking at behavior. And that is a completely different way of looking at the world. Because you can, you're making judgments on what people do, not what people are, whether they're on your side or the other side. That alone, that step back from taking sides, is, it's like in politics, you know, the left can't say anything right if you're on the right. And the right can't say anything right if you're on the left. So what you do to take back control of your own perceptions and withdraw from the sides and withdraw from the program is you listen to what they say and you decide if you agree with it or not. So some left-wing politician, you might disagree with them on everything, but they say something, you say, yeah, I agree with that. That's right, I agree with that. And some right-wing politician says the same. Oh yeah, I agree with that. I don't agree with anything else you say, but I agree with that. You are taking your sovereignty back. You are taking your uniqueness back, because you're now deciding what you perceive and not being told that you must perceive because that side bad, your side good. That too is that process of withdrawing from the theater, the drama, and coming to your own conclusions is absolutely crucial too. Because what that does, it destroys divide and rule. Because you don't want to fight anybody, you're just trying to glean from them what you agree with and what you don't agree with, so you're coming to your own unique conclusions. It's a completely different way of looking at the world.
Thanks for that, David. That was
I'm going to go deep in this one.
Thorough explanation.
You're going to have to. You've got a little answer, me. You're going to have to. You're going to have to do it because I can't get me.
Oh, that's a big one.
Blimey, that's a long one. I haven't got my glasses. Can't see it.
I haven't got my glasses. This one is by Ruben. In your latest books, you're talking about human beings that don't have the divine spark, but are merely advanced AI. Is there a way to distinguish them from the others? And then it continues, realizing we live in a simulation, along with all the other insights I learned from your work, has given me so much peace, clarity, and confidence. However, I sometimes struggle with dealing with this fake reality, although I am really convinced it is all just a trap. Still, I have to live my life in this world. Do you have any tips for that? So basically the first question is, how can we distinguish a divine human from AI, and how do we still live in this world?
Well, let's kind of clarify that. Over the period of time that I've been researching this, and you know, when I went to see the psychic Betty Shine in 1990, trying to understand why I felt this presence around me for a year, and what came through was I was going to go out on the world stage and be real great secrets, which sounded crazy at the time. And one of the things was that information was, I was going to be led to information, and information was going to be put into my mind, and I'd wonder where it came from. And both things have happened ever since. And like I said earlier, what tends to happen is a subject will come into my life, and suddenly information about that subject is coming at me from all angles. And another thing kind of happened to me in the first 2 years after the 1990, I was coming across synchronistically information. At that time, it was basically all about how the world's not controlled by the forces that appear to be controlling it in the world of the scene. And I would conclude from that what I thought was going on. Then after about 2 years, it was like I knew what was going on, but the information, the tangible information, the names, dates, places, confirmation would then come immediately afterwards. That's been going on ever since. And so what I realized quite a long time ago was that reincarnation was real. And the evidence for it is actually phenomenal if you look for it. And in the reveal, I feature a guy called Ian Stevenson. He was an American-Canadian psychiatrist. And he's got interested in young children, I mean really young, around the world who were describing past lives in detail. including names, including locations, including people that were many times still alive. And they were describing the layout of buildings in places they'd never been to, which turned out to be true. So what he did is he checked out to see if their stories were supportable by the evidence, and he found that overwhelmingly they were. And what he found was that by the age of about 7, those memories start to fade. Sometimes it continues into adulthood, but more often it starts to fade about the age of 7, I guess, as this world's programming kind of shuts the door. You know, you got these young kids that talk about, you know, they've got a friend in their bedroom, right? And then suddenly the friend's not there anymore because the parents are going, oh, don't be so silly, that's ridiculous, you can't be doing that, you know, it doesn't exist and all this stuff. So it shuts it off. And I remember I featured this story in the reel. He got this little boy, I think it was a little boy. Yeah, it was a little boy. And he said that he was married to this woman in this family that was still alive, right? Obviously much older now. And so he actually took the boy to the family, and he was describing the house and the layout, which turned out to be true. And he was in this conversation, and what the family said to him was, well, if you're who you say you were, and you were in a past life, where's the will? We couldn't find your will. And the kid went and pointed to the floorboard, and when they took it up, there was the will, right? So it was, and you know, if you read Ian Stevenson did thousands of these studies. And then you know, I've seen programs, was it one called The Ghost of My Child or something like that, where they take kids back to these places. And it's extraordinary what they know that they could never know in this life. So anyway, the reason I say that is I then started to think, okay, here is a simulation that is designed to entrap perception and to create events to which we react, which generate low vibrational energy, etc. And I thought, well, I can understand how consciousness, which is what we really are, is just a vehicle to experience this reality. I can understand how it could be manipulated once to come into this simulation and get caught in it. But, you know, I've traveled a lot. Well, I don't travel so much now, do I? I'm banned from everywhere, but I've traveled a lot before.
You're a level 3 terrorist, aren't you?
Yeah, level 3 terrorist, yeah. Yeah, so they say. Anyway, so I've traveled a lot, and vast numbers of the 8 billion are not having a good time. They're struggling to survive another day in Africa and South America and Asia and what have you. And so I thought, I can understand how people could become, you know, tricked or entrapped in this once. But when you leave the body, as I was convinced by then you bloody do, in fact, it goes way back, that does. Why the hell would you come back? You go, I ain't going back there, bloody hell. Nightmare, mate. But it was clear that we do, that consciousness does. So my question was, why? And I go into this in the reveal and the dream and stuff, but from various sources that I came across, and not these people who've, you know, traveled the astral and near-death experiences and all this stuff, it is clear that we do. So the question is why, and what the hell is going on? And it's become clear to me that this level of the simulation, because in terms of the simulation, what came to me at about, I don't know, 2003, something like that, just after the millennium, is I just had this overwhelming feeling that we're in a simulation. And that the speed of light is not the fastest speed that exists, it's pedestrian actually, but it is the fastest speed of this simulation, this level of the simulation, as I then realized. But there are other levels of the simulation, which include this astral dimension I talked about earlier. And that astral dimension is what we call the afterlife, or the spirit world. So consciousness leaves the body and enters this other reality, which is unseen to us because for reasons I've talked about. And somehow they've got to get us back in. And when you study these accounts of near-death experiences and what have you, I'd like to create incredibly common themes. The trickery continues in that astral space, in the sense that authority still rules perception. So in this reality, so many people look to authority figures, governments, experts, scientists, doctors, whatever, to tell them what to believe and to tell them what to do. And then when you study these near-death experience accounts, when people leave this reality and enter the astral, these authority figures are spirit guides, elders, religious heroes that suddenly appear to match your in this world belief before. And because people are, or consciousness there in another form outside the body is still bewildered at what's happening, and there's a reason for that we might come to, they follow the, quote, guidance of these authority figures. And they get told, oh, it's your karma. Got to go back and experience this, and it's all about your evolution and all that stuff. And so you have this Buddhist concept of the wheel of samsara, where you are on this wheel of keep coming back to this earth dense physical reality. And my God, it is dense, as people who've been out there have told me. What they say is you have to reach a state of enlightenment that basically generates a frequency that allows you to leave the wheel of samsara, the astral human wheel of reincarnation. And there's an old esoteric concept called the ring past not. And that concept says that there is a level beyond which you cannot go unless you reach a certain level of, well, enlightenment, in other words, frequency. And then you're out of here, piece of cake. And so what they have to do to keep us not only in this human world, but in the astral level of the simulation, is to maintain our perception so that our frequency does not reach a level that just out of here, no problem. They have to keep us in the prison, and it's a perceptual prison. So this level is how it plays out. We know about that. But in the astral, it's this idea of you keep coming back and coming back and coming back to have different experiences. And how do they do these different experiences? Well, what I've concluded in the last few years is that the human body well, funnily enough, I've been calling it this since the 1990s, is a biological computer. And you know, we have this concept that biological is natural and technological is technological. But how do we know that? We don't know that. We're comparing the biological with the technological, and by that comparison, presuming that the biological is natural. Well, I can tell you from my research over the years, this cult don't think biological is natural. It perceives biological to be an advanced form of technology. So when you've got the Moderna company documents, they talk about the content of their COVID vaccine, fake vaccine files, as being an operating system. Because they treat the biological as a computer. Because it's the vehicle that we use to experience this reality. And so when consciousness enters the body is a decoder of the simulation. And what's great and very, very good for people like me is that, although it's very bad in another sense, very bad, is this technological explosion that we're experiencing, AI, computerization, all that stuff. It actually technologically mirrors what we're experiencing in terms of this reality and how it works. So with a computer is decoding Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is a radiation field. The computer is decoding the information in that Wi-Fi field and putting on the screen in a totally different state to what it exists in the Wi-Fi field. It's a decoder, that's what the computer's doing. And if you look at mainstream science alone, you realize that that's what the body's doing. The five senses are picking up frequency information from the simulation field of information. That's what it is, the simulation. It's a simulation of information. And the five senses decode that into electrical information, which is then communicated to the brain, and the brain then decodes that into what I say is digital holographic information. And that digital holographic information is the world we believe is external to us, which is actually going on in here, just as the decoding process of the Wi-Fi field is going on inside the computer. So when they are coming in to, when you are coming into an incarnation, consciousness, the moment you connect with the body is delivering to you, by its computer nature, a version of reality, which is that this external world is real and solid. And if you look on the internet, it's fascinating to watch. You see these compilations of people who put on the headset in a virtual reality game, and in seconds, their reality is completely changed. They're in an empty room, or they're in a room with someone filming it, and suddenly they're thrashing about, they're screaming, they're running, they're falling off their chair. And what's happened is the information being fed through the headset and the gloves and the audio with the more sophisticated ones is overriding their five sense decoding of this reality, and it's delivering another reality. And suddenly, you know, some lion coming to bloody attack you is real. Ah! Now, imagine consciousness enters the body, and the body starts delivering this reality like a headset. Except with a headset, you can take it off and realize it's just a game. But with this, for this headset to stop, you've got to die, or the body's got to die. And so at the end of a human life, we talk about dying. We don't die. We're infinite. We're eternal. We're consciousness, exploring forever, forever. That's as bad as it gets. But the moment the body ceases to function, it stops decoding this reality. It stops decoding this level of the simulation, and consciousness is released from that perception into another reality with a different perception. And then, wheel of samsara, it's your karma, evolution. You mean I'm an expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be? What do you mean, my evolution? So the question then came to me, talking about the non-player character part of this, is how do they do it? Because these near-death experiences, there are some that are fascinating, that still, they're the few, but the common themes are, again, very compelling, is they remember the incarnation process. And some remember the pre-incarnation process, where they're being guided on what their next life is going to be. And what's fascinating is the way that these people that have these memories describe the astral and the incarnation process is incredibly technological. We think about the astral, the spirit world, and it's all spiritual. No, it's still a level of physicality. It's just a more etheric physicality, but it's still a form of physicality at the level they're talking about. And they're given lives to experience. How do they do that? Well, what I'm saying in the books is that there is a program playing through the body. And it's a program that is guiding your life unless it's overridden by consciousness, which it can be. And this is the awakening process. You know, we talk about non-player characters. A non-player character is someone who is basically being run by the program. They are so disconnected from their expanded levels of consciousness, and their focus of attention is so focused on what the biological computer is delivering to them as a reality, that that reality is controlling their life, and that program is controlling their life. That includes the people they meet, the people they interact with. It's all part of the program interacting with other programs. That's the non-player character. And, you know, in terms of how do you see them, well, they tend to be people who have no thought of their own, they have no mind of their own, no uniqueness of their own. And it's also interesting. I mean, you probably come across people like this, where they have, you can talk to them, you can present evidence which is extremely compelling, and they get it in the moment. Oh yeah, I can see that. And then the next time you meet them, boom, they have defaulted to default position, and they're the same as if you'd never spoken to them again before. I mean, many people have come across people like that. And it's not that they're bad people, it's not that they're lesser people, it's that this program is running them. And unless they overwhelm it with consciousness, override it with consciousness, it will go on running them from cradle to grave. But what awakening is awakening from that program. You know, this is why when you start to awaken, and people in this room will all know this, you start to see the world differently. You start to see yourself differently. Why? Because you're now expanding into the consciousness that is beyond the program that would normally run you. And that's what awakening is. So if you can see awakening in another way as deprogramming, literally. Because what we are naturally, eternally, is consciousness. We are a state of awareness, a state of being aware. That's what we are. That's our core. That's our I. That's our infinity. and once you tap into that, the program is overridden. And you're now starting to see the world in a completely different way to someone still in the program, because the program's telling them what to think, it's telling them how to react, and it's controlling their behavior. So, it's not that, non-player characters are like lesser people. Anyone can become conscious. But they're people that have not become conscious, and this program's running them. And this is another thing that made me think how stupid and ridiculous karma is. I've studied a lot of these near-death experiences accounts, and that you see how these so-called lives that we have, these brief experiences in this reality, are carefully constructed, and the program then runs that life unless it's overwhelmed by consciousness. And then when they come out, having had a program that's run them and got them to react and respond and what have you, and live their lives as the program demands, they're then told, oh, you got more karma while you were there. What? It was the bloody program, mate. Oh no, you got to go back. And what's kind of interesting is, why don't we know this? Why don't we remember any of this? And there's a lady I quote in the book, in the reveal, called Lauda Leon, who has this memory of coming in to incarnation. And she describes, and others have described, how there is what I call in the book a mind wipe. You come in and this lady describes going through an electromagnetic field which is there to wipe your mind. These old big tapes they used to have, these videotapes. And you used to rub them over a magnetic field to clean them so you could use them again. It's a similar thing, similar principle. Your mind's wiped. And so when you come in, although obviously it doesn't work every time, because some people do remember, even if it's only to the age of 7, but overwhelmingly people don't remember anything because of this mind wipe. And so you're basically hitting this world with a blank sheet of paper again, trying to work it out. And when you leave the body, this is another interesting thing. When you leave the body and you read and watch these near-death experience accounts, they talk about when they leave the body, they're entering a reality they'd never experienced before. A place of bliss and what have you. And of course, compared with, a lot of people's lives here, anything is bloody blissful, isn't it, when you get out? But it's blissful. I've never, one of the things you hear a lot, I've never experienced anything like it before. Well, hold on a minute. You believe in reincarnation, right? Well, yeah. Well, why haven't you experienced it before then? Because this mind wipe continues. That's why people who leave the body are bewildered at what's going on. What's happening? Because they can't remember having experienced it many times before. And the idea is to get you up the tunnel or towards the light or wherever, and in the wheel of samsara, before you know what's going on. So you're back here, and it continues. Because if you had a simulation set up that required consciousness to generate low vibrational emotion and thought, which you feed off, you can't have people leaving and saying, sod that for a game of soldiers, I'm out of here, ain't going back there. You've got to make it an enclosed loop, and it's what people are calling the trap. And for me, there are 3 types of, there are many, multiple, infinite types, but there are 3 types of being, if you like. One is you're in the human body, and the human body is delivering this reality to you. Now, what you can do is you can get caught in it and believe in it, or you can become conscious and realize it's a dream It's an induced dream. You know, years ago when I was a journalist, I used to wake up in the morning and I'd put the radio on, Radio 4 in those days, and I would fall asleep again many times, and then I'd wake up and I'd have a dream. I'd have a dream while I was asleep, really, really vivid dream. And when I woke up, every single time in this period, my dream related to what was being discussed on the radio. So it was an induced dream. And that's what this simulation is. It's an induced dream. So you can realize it's a dream and you can withdraw from it. You can still interact with it. I do all the time. You can still worry about Leicester City and what's going to happen to them this season. You can still do that. But you know it doesn't matter because you know it's a dream. But you can enjoy it and you can interact with it. But you're aware of what it is. It's when you're in the illusion and of the illusion that the illusion controls you. Illusions only control you when you think they're real. So what we have in these three states of being is the physical body, which is delivering this reality to us, which we can take to be real, or I can see what's going on. I'm just going to interact with it, but I know I can see it for what it is, and it's a completely different way of living your life, because from this slightly withdrawn or more withdrawn point of view, you can see how the pieces fit. You can see the connections. That can't. This can see them. This is what awakening is. You're awakening from that to that, right? So, and this is why, as Christiana mentioned, I challenge this, what I say is a hijacked alternative media at its central core, because it's not doing that. It's gone from there to there. It's not gone to there. It's gone to there. It's a bigger prison cell, but it's still a prison cell of right-wing politics and religion, etc. So you got the human body, and then in the astral, when we leave the body, that's what I'm saying that religions call the soul. The soul is the astral level of reality. It's that energetic shell, if you like, that interacts with the astral. Because if I come in with consciousness alone into this reality, I can't do that. I can't interact with it because my consciousness is vibrating so fast, I can't interact with it. So this shell, this biological computer, is what I use to experience this reality so I can then interact with it. So in the astral, we need an external, if you like, energetic shell to interact with that. And that's what we call the soul. And they are both, I would say, in the simulation. Beyond that, just words, but it's what I dub spirit, is that self-identity that we are pure awareness. No form, just a state of being aware. And that self-identity, all self-identities have a frequency expression. So when you think you're little me, I have no power, and you are consumed by fear and insecurity, you are, by that perception, in a low vibrational state. When you reach that point of self-identity, where you realize that this is just a shell, it's not who you are, this dies, not you, then, and you think you have a soul, there is another level to you, well, your soul level will generate a certain frequency from that perception of identity. But then you reach this other level of pure awareness. I'm just a state of being aware. I am the creative force. I can create anything. I can be anything. I can go anywhere. I can be everything and nothing, everywhere and nowhere. That's who I am. That frequency is so far beyond the simulation that when you leave the body, you're out here, boom, gone. Bye, see ya. And the idea, like I said earlier, is to hold your perception. They're not bothered if religions talk about you having a soul, because that's still in the matrix, they're still in the simulation. They are terrified of people realizing the true I, consciousness, an eternal, infinite state of awareness that can perceive itself as Ethel on the checkout or Bill driving the bus, or it can perceive itself as all that is, has been, and ever can be. And the difference in frequency between those two self-identities are massive, are colossal, and one is out here, one is caught in here. And what they're trying to do all the time, therefore, is to control our self-identity. If they can control how we see ourselves and limit it, they'll keep you in the matrix. If they can't, gone.
So a lot of humans on this planet are obviously traumatized. They can be traumatized through experiences they've had in this life. If we're still, in pain, it's very hard to see beyond this pain, because it's you could almost say it's a physical sensation for a lot of people. It's driving their everyday life.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I have a different view of all that. When I talk about this being a dream, I don't mean it's a bit of a dream. I mean it's all of a dream. All the trauma is a dream. It's not nice to experience. I've experienced a lot in my life. But when I look at it from a step back perspective, it's all a dream. And what you can do is you can perceive yourself as a physical I, and there are many levels of perceiving yourself as a physical I. You can completely think that this is all I am, and when I die, I just disappear. Or you can, at another level, think that you have to do all this stuff of letting go of trauma and letting go of this and letting go of that. And so you go on these often long efforts to process the trauma and process this and process that to try to get rid of it. My view of all this is become conscious beyond it all. It's just a dream. It wasn't a nice dream, but it was just a dream. You are not that. You are the consciousness that experienced that. What we call the labels of a human life, the IMRs as I call them, man, woman, this religion, this sexuality, they're just experiences. That's all they are. You are infinity. You are eternal. What does it matter what that woman did to you in 1963? What does it matter that person cut you up at the lights in 1974? Or all the things we hold on to? It doesn't matter. We are eternal. And what they want us to do is they want us to pull us into that stuff. Because then we're generating the energy, obviously, they want, but we're also caught in a low vibrational state of trying to process trauma. And or you can go, that's not me. That's an experience. It's not me. I am infinity. And that's the way I've dealt with things in my life. The more, I'm not saying I'm sitting cross-legged on a mountain saying, oh yeah, I worked it all out in 1990. Oh, you kidding? It's more recently that I've withdrawn from the dream and I've withdrawn from the drama. And this is a massive way that we're held, not only in the matrix reality frequency band, but we're held vibrationally in the simulation is drama. It's constant drama. And I have to say, it's very important that the alternative media looks at itself from that point of view as well. because it's generating drama all the time. Oh my God, have you heard the latest? Oh my God, oh, what's happened now? Oh, what's happened? What's happened? Drama, 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 and it pulls you in. And it's like you reach a state where instead of being an actor on the stage in the drama, you're in the audience observing the drama. And because you're in the audience, you can see the whole stage. You can see how it's all being played out. But when you're on the stage in the drama, your focus of attention is so much in the drama, everything else is lost. And this is, when I talk about perception, what it's really about is capturing your attention, to put your attention on things that overwhelmingly don't matter, but you think they do. I mean, how many times has there been a drama in our lives? And you see this with people who are what they call drama queens and drama kings or whatever. They feed off drama. Why? Because these dramas manifest in the body as a chemical reaction. And they're literally hooked on the bloody drug. You know that, what was that, that song, Addicted to Love? You know, these people that jump from partner to partner, and after the first kind of rush of attraction has gone, they're off to someone else because that chemical reaction of that rush of attraction, they want more of, and they've got to keep having it. So they're addicted to love, basically, and all that stuff as it's called. And you know, people are addicted to worry because they go into cold turkey if they've got nothing to worry about. It's all about the drama pulling you in. And this is what I'd say when you take a step back and you see it's a dream, an induced dream. You can interact with it, you can enjoy it, but you're aware of what it is. And how many times, as I was saying, do we think that the world has bloody ended? You'll never guess what's happened. Oh my God. And within an hour, a day, a week, doesn't matter at all. Well, what about you were getting very upset. Oh yeah, it's all right now, it's all sorted. Right, so the trick is to realize what matters and what doesn't in the moment, so you don't get pulled in the drama. Okay, it's okay.
So David, how can people distinguish between being dissociated from it or having a healthy detachment?
Yeah, you don't, you can't live in this world and completely ignore it. Of course you can't. I don't, my God, I mean, I can't be accused of that. But I see it in a different way now. You know, I see other people in the alternative media, for instance, you know, screaming and shouting, and it said, oh, you never guess what's happened now, bombshell news and all this stuff. And I look at it and I think, well, you know, it'll be something else tomorrow. There'll be something else the next day. And what you do is you pick out what really matters, as opposed to the endless bloody drama that in the end doesn't matter at all. And what it does, you know, this thing, it basically balances it out, because you're not constantly doing this all the time.
Which diminishes the louche production as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. I should have mentioned, Robert Monroe, when he learned in his astral travels, in this CIA operation, etc., that these entities were feeding off low vibrational human emotion. He called that energy louche, L-O-O-S-H, and that's what a lot of people now call it, who are kind of seeing this, louche. And this reality is basically a louche machine. It doesn't want you happy. It doesn't want you joyful. It wants you in low vibrational emotional states. That's what it's set up to do. So it's constantly generating wars and suffering and deprivation, and it's doing it for that reason. And we can choose not to give it to them. And I tell you, the more you do, just detach. Don't withdraw and ignore it. You're still interacting with it, but you in a completely different way. Now you can see it for what it is. And it doesn't have that dramatic impact upon you that it had before. And I know that because I've experienced it. So this is an experience I've been through, and I know other people have. But, like I say, the alternative media has to look at itself as well. But it won't. That central core won't. There's some great people in the alternative media, fantastic people, but they're outside that central core now. They weren't before, they are now. But that central core is so focused on the drama that it's actually playing the game that the cult once played. And we need to go the other way, remove the cause of the problem, not add to it.
Thank you so much, David.
Do you want to get another one?
We have time for one more, so I don't know how that happened. The time flew by so fast. So
I've got verbal diarrhea, that's why. Honestly. We'll have another one.
So choose one. Okay, do you want me to pick it?
I've had the hands-on healing, I've had the crystal therapy, none of it bloody works. I've still got verbal diarrhea. But do you see, that's one of the things, that when you're connecting dots, you have to keep talking a bit, because connecting dots is real important, because, and this is why I don't do mainstream interviews anymore. They're even past ridiculing me now. They just want to ignore me. But when I did, they're very difficult to do because A, they're short, and B, they're always interrupting you, and you can't connect the dots. So something that sounds crazy, like we're being manipulated by entities that we can't see, that to 5 sense perception is ridiculous, impossible. So you've got to explain it, and then, oh yeah, I get what you mean now. But without that, they don't get what you mean. They think you're crazy. Yeah. Which is why doing mainstream interviews is well, they don't ask me anymore. It's like Gandhi said, first they ridicule you, then they abuse you, or worse to that effect, and then they ignore you, and then you win, So yeah. We've got one more stage to go, I suppose.
Hope the latter happens. So last question is from a lady called Karen, and her question is what happened to the camps that they were building for the unvaccinated? How many were there in the UK?
Well, I didn't go into all that at the time because I wanted more evidence for it, but the camps are definitely real longer term. They've come up in America quite a lot. There's a lot of things that came up, because I've been doing this a long time, there's a lot of things that came up in the 1990s that have kind of, been forgotten about. But, those camps are definitely there in America, that's for sure. And there is a plan eventually that dissidents will be dealt with in terms of being removed from mainstream society. But that's longer term, and how long is another thing. But if you look at the other way, in the interim that this is being done, it's being done through what is the Chinese social credit system. And we're seeing that unfold more and more in the West, and under Starmer it will be pushed on in this country. And that's creation of the digital currency and the creation of the AI-controlled world, the AI-controlled reality. And so the idea is that if you behave the way authority wants you to behave, you get credits. That's what happens in China. And if you don't, then you have them taken away. And if you have enough taken away, you can't interact with mainstream society. In China, you can't go on a train or you can't go on a plane. You're excluded from society. And that's the way they want to play it. And the more, like vaccine passports and all that are all part of it. You have to conform to authorities' demands, otherwise you get excluded from mainstream society. And we did have very clearly an example of that during COVID, where that was happening. Like people were losing their jobs if they didn't conform by taking the fake vaccine and stuff. And so that's the way it's going in this interim time anyway. And it's once that happens, if we go on allowing it to happen, and you know, the central core of the mainstream, the alternative media is saying we're winning. Well, we're winning when that's not happening anymore. It is still happening. It's still unfolding. And these cameras, for instance, that are going up in London for number plate cameras, for this ULEZ zone, where they charge £12.50 a day if your car is not the right kind, they're not really there just to police ULEZ. That's the interim. They're there to police the 15-minute cities where you can't travel out of them eventually without permission. This you're going to see the digital currency, the central bank digital currency, pushed on by Starmer because he's a cooperative. That's what he is, and that's the way they're going to be dealing with it, and dealing with dissidents. And you know, I've said over the years, going back to the 1990s, if you want to see what's planned for the West tomorrow, look at China today, because China's the blueprint. You know, one of the things that people need to understand to get how this works is that there are no borders to this cult. It doesn't do borders. That's for public consumption. It does areas of operation. It doesn't do borders. It's a global operation. And it's my view, as I've written in the books, that the Mao revolution in China was a cult revolution, and it was designed to create a closed society, which China was, still is to an extent, but massively was for a long time, within which a system of mass control could be incubated and developed that would eventually be played out across the world. And so you have the social credit system in China. So you have millions of cameras that can find people in real time very quickly. I've seen documentaries where they've sent people out into a Chinese city and the cameras have found them in minutes. That's the idea. And if you think of COVID, which is supposed to have come out of China, then look how the West has mirrored China more and more in the way it operates since COVID. What started to happen then is the Chinese system started to be played out. And the idea of this digital currency, if you don't play ball, they can cut you off from it. We've seen the debanking, that's just the start of what they plan. And the idea is that digital currencies will be programmable so that if you try to spend them outside of your zone or your sector, they won't work. So the only place you could spend your money is within your sector. This is the plan, and it's unfolding before our eyes. And so we have a choice as a human race. You know, we can go on allowing this to happen, or we can refuse to cooperate with it. And you know, in the end, we have to turn those hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of London saying we're not having it and we're not obeying you. We have to turn those numbers into focusing on what's happening now. Because COVID was really extreme, and so it generated that response. But my God, what I'm talking about is incredibly extreme, and we need to start focusing on that understanding of where this is planned to go. Because, you know, I'm 72. I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I think I'm going to be here a long time, but, who knows? We'll see how it goes. But I look at my grandkids, I look at my children, and they've got to live in this bloody world that these psychopaths are creating. And we owe it to them not to let fear of consequences get in the way of doing what we need to do. Because, you know, people have said to me, how come you have been able to predict all this stuff that's coming? I said, well, A, it's a plan. That's why you uncover the plan. You can say what's going to happen, but you can only say what's going to happen if nothing intervenes. If something intervenes, the plan doesn't happen. And we've got to this point without enough people intervening, and that's got to change. And until it does, it will go on, and when it does, it won't. End of story.
So why are we in a passion spending?
Whatever you try to do, you can't always be perfect in every way. And if you try to be, you end up being perfect on nothing. If you try to be everything to everybody all the time, you end up being nothing to no one. So sometimes you have to use the system. I don't get the exact nature of the question, but the kind of theme I think I got. You sometimes have to use the system to expose the system. You know, I have enormous reservations about the genuineness of Elon Musk, but I'll use Twitter X while I can, because I'll use the system to expose the system. What you can do is withdraw and try to be perfect and holier than thou, and okay, but what good does that do? Because you're not actually communicating anything. So, you know, you sometimes have to use the system to expose the system, and I will, and I'll do it. I'll take every opportunity to do it. If I get asked to go on the mainstream media at some point in the long-term future, I will do it if it's the right thing, if I think it's the right thing to get to people that I normally wouldn't be able to communicate with. I'll do that. That doesn't mean I support the mainstream media. God, I worked at it. I know how sick it is. Yeah, you have to do what you think is necessary to get the outcome you want, which is people seeing there is another way of looking at the world that they're not being told.
Thank you so much. The time has flown by. Like, I can't believe how fast it's been. Thank you so much. Is there just a final closing message you want to tell the people before?
Well, I would just say this. You know, again, when I started out in 1990, the only people that were in any way interested in anything I had to say were what were then called the New Age. So I explored that in the first few years because they were the only people that would give me a platform. And I looked at it, and eventually, you know, I could see that it seemed to be everything seemed to be terribly complicated. Like, you go on quests and you drink green tea and whatever. I've got no problem with that. I can't stand green tea, but if people love it, well, good luck to them. But it was like, it seemed terribly complicated, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and you've got to do that, and then you've got to, you know, get rid of this, and you've got to deal with this trauma and all that stuff. And I don't see it like that. I see it as self-identity. That is for me, and I can only talk about my own experience, but that's the simple way out of here, is self-identity. If you self-identify with being little me, you will live a little me life. Not because you are, but because you believe you are. And what you perceive, what you believe you perceive, what you perceive you experience. It's the create your own reality scenario. And so if you see other people who perceive themselves in a different way, and they tend to make things happen that the little me's don't. Not because they're better, but because they have a different perception and self-identity. And what we call awakening is to change your self-identity. It's to go from I am little me, I am my body, I am my labels of a human life, to I am eventually all that is, has been, and ever can be, having a brief human experience. And that's all it is, it's just an experience. We are eternal, the experience is not. And so what we call awakening is to redefine self-identity from perceiving little me and the body as the I to realizing the infinite nature of all of us, all part of the same infinite awareness ultimately. What happens is that process of expanding self-identity expands you into greater and greater and greater swathes of infinite reality. So when you are in the myopia of little me, what power do I have? I'm nobody, I can't do anything. I'll look to my betters. Then you are interacting with a fraction of infinity, which is why you perceive yourself as little me, because that's your perception interacting the size of perception, the nature of perception, with the infinite field of possibility. When you expand your awareness, your self-identity, and you realize the scale, infinite scale of who you are, what happens is as your self-identity expands, so the scale of the infinite reality field of consciousness, you are tapping into greater and greater swathes of it. And so as your self-identity changes, your view of the world changes because you are tapping into a much more expanded field of consciousness, insight, knowing, intuition, awareness. And that's what we call awakening. And what the cult and that which controls the cult wants us to do, it wants us there. We're no problem there. When we're there, oh shit, that's what's happening. And so self-identity is the key. And that's why the cult is absolutely focused on controlling self-identity. It wants you to self-identify this as you. It's not. It's a vehicle for you. You are infinite. This is finite.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Bye. Thank you.